Hey, it's Kimberly Ballard for Elijah and Moses channel, and thank you for joining me on my channel today to hear what I have to say. I'm going to be talking about this replica Ark of the Covenant that they made, the one that I talked about before that was brought to Mar-a-Lago, and it was there during one of the feast days. I think it was Sukkot, and then they took it back to Jerusalem. But there's some things I wanted to reiterate while reading this and give my own commentary about it. And this was written October 21st, 2024. And it was in the Jewish News Syndicate. And it said, with eyes on winning war, building third Jewish temple, Ark replica shown in Jerusalem. And this is the same one they took to Mar-a-Lago. Just kind of like a visitation trip. But it has extremely profound implications. A replica of the Ark of the Covenant, painstakingly constructed, its creators say, to the Torah specifications of the sacred vessel that was the first temple's central fixture, was displayed in Jerusalem on Sunday evening during the intermediate days of the Sukkot holiday. So there you go, it was Sukkot. And the ark described in the Torah, which housed the Ten Commandments tablets among other holy objects, was hidden after the destruction of the first temple per rabbinic tradition. At Jerusalem's King David Hotel, the replica shown in the hotel's sukkah contained a refurbished Torah scroll which survived the Holocaust from Thessaloniki, Greece. Several members of the Knesset and Israeli activists were on hand at the hotel for an event and festive meal. A stop on the replica's journey retracing the steps of the biblical prototype. Earlier in the day, it was fitted with the Greek Torah at Jerusalem's City of David, and it was later displayed with some difficulty and via a Schweppes pallet jack on a rooftop overlooking the Western Wall Plaza and Temple Mount. The replica ark stopped in Jericho, the first Israeli city inhabited by Jews after the biblical exodus from Egypt, and in Shiloh, the site that served as the Jewish capital for 369 years after Jews settled in Israel, and the location of the tabernacle before the building of the first temple. It took 17 volunteers who live in several countries 3.5 years to build the replica ark, which is made out of donated gold and some 3 tons of Egyptian acacia, according to Jake, the project's chief architect, who prefers to remain anonymous, and Louis Topper, its principal financier. Although the Torah delves into extensive detail about the construction of the ark and its dimensions and materials, it leaves out a lot of critical information that a builder would need to create the sacred vessel. It was really a deep process of discovery and a mystery. It's not a question of just reading the descriptions literally and building the device, Jake said at the event. You have to do some heavy research. You have to immerse yourself, and you have to go on a journey. You sure are telling the truth on that one. Building the ark is the ultimate journey, he added. It's the ultimate pilgrimage to discover God and discover the Jewish people, and that pilgrimage was both horrifying and very satisfying. Each step raised new questions about how such a complex object was constructed before the advent of modern manufacturing. We went with the highest purity of gold available to the Egyptians, Jake said at the event. The purity used for the royal artifacts, 23.75 carats. So we went with 23.75 carats. And the volunteers also drew on a tremendous amount of math to build the ark, according to the project's chief architect. A lot of the concepts or motifs that we used follow up, exhibit Kabbalistic or some other concept by way of numerology, Jake said. The math parallels the ones found both in the tabernacle and the first temple, and they used the same kind of numerology. He added that the golden ratio, a relationship between values that has been seen as beautiful since ancient times, and which appears in nature, including human anatomy, played a very important part in the design. That's one reason why the art is so aesthetically appealing, Jake said. Designing a functional replica. Illustrators of 4 biblical stages of the Exodus from Egypt are displayed on the exterior of the Ark replica. Moses' prophecy at the burning bush, the parting of the Red Sea, the clouds and pillar of fire that protected and guided the Jews in the desert, and the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. The Ark by itself is a book, Jake said at the event. It's a book that tells a story of the Exodus. It's the ultimate manifestation and illustration of our Exodus and our relationship to God. The project architect told attendees that the replica had to be both beautiful and functional. The Ark weighs around 85 pounds, so it's pretty heavy, and the structure's legs and poles need to sustain the load for extended periods of time. The replica of the Second Temple object also is exposed to a high degree of torsion, the twisting of the structure, because it's carried by 4 individuals, and due to that twisting force, if the joint is not strong enough, you'll eventually break it apart. To construct a replica that withstands the tests of time, the volunteers who worked on the project studied arks that were constructed in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians were prolific ark builders, Jake said, and they had many, many types of arks that they constructed during that period. In another video I did a long time ago, I showed this comparison to how these Egyptian arks looked, and how they would do it is it would be like a chest of wood, and then the poles would be running through it. It would be carried on the shoulders of the priests of Egypt. And then on top of it, they had a pagan god. So the Ark of the Covenant of God, he was appearing to the people of Israel between the 2 cherubim and speaking to them from off the mercy seat. So there's a lot to this story that I cannot possibly fit in this program. So please just bear with me to get as much in as I can. But following the group's initial research, the volunteers built a full-size, low-cost, proof-of-concept plywood model before building the gold replica. Following the group's initial research, the volunteers, we took it for walks. We figured out what the joints should be and how the mechanical connection should work. Since Egyptians didn't know what mechanical fasteners were, the Ark replica has no screws or nails. We had to come up with really creative ways to solve the mechanical fastening. It may look trivial to actually build a wooden joint, but the Egyptians used very specific techniques when they created the wooden joints. And they also used a fastening technique called mortise and tenon, which is one of the best wood joints that there is, that can practically last forever. And Jake said, we had to analyze a lot of those. So it's considered one of the best joints to get whenever you buy a piece of furniture. Now I know this because my great-grandfather was a fine furniture salesman, and also because my mother took us to furniture stores my entire life. She was interested in the fine furniture, especially Hickory, North Carolina is one of the best places for fine furniture. And a shout out to my friends in Hickory, Frederick and Tess. And anyway, this is just some information I know from growing up that way, and also just because my mother was into fine furniture and she knew all the things to look for and taught us these things that she passed down to us. And so they analyzed these ancient arks. So the idea of the ark really came from Egypt because they have, there's that god that looks like a dog and he's black. I think it's Anubis or something. They have an ark with him sitting like a dog on top of the box with the poles running through it, which I showed before in a video a long time ago. But the crown jewel atop the golden box, which required painstaking detail, is the pair of male and female cherubs, winged angels with childlike features that face each other. Now, the Bible does not say that they're male and female at all. It doesn't say they're cherubs. They're cherubim. Cherubs are kind of children-like creatures. And nothing says that they were childlike in the Bible. I actually believe they were priests, and I believe that what Ron Wyatt showed, which is a replica of that, is on the cover of my book because I got permission from the people that did the rendition of what Ron Wyatt saw, and they allowed me to use it for my book cover. So it's very difficult to hammer gold to a high degree of precision, so a lot of the techniques have to be invented and discovered. Scripture tells us that God spoke to Moses in between the cherubims, and he says cherubs. But the purpose of the ark was to have a communication channel between Moses and God. So it's the communication device, and it certainly wasn't an electronic communication device, but it did have electronic powers. It was also a sacred object with military implications. In biblical times prior to the temple, there were likely two arks. The Bible doesn't say that. One housing the Ten Commandments that was always in the tabernacle, and the other which led the Jewish army in battle, according to Jake. The Ark of the Covenant was the weapon that was taken into war. And actually the Roman legions, they would carry the Roman standard into their camp. A lot of times this had images of the face of their Roman Caesar on it. So the royal standard had the face of their leader, their commander on it. And so the Ark of the Covenant would have had, the face of God would have been upon it. Several attendees said that it was meaningful that the Ark replica was built and brought to Jerusalem amid Israel's seven-front war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and all the latter's other terror proxies. There's a very deep connection, believe it or not, between the Philistines and the Ark, said Simcha Rothman, a member of Knesset and chair of its Constitution, Law, and Justice Committee. Rothman noted that when the Jews misused the Ark in the Bible, it was taken away from them and held temporarily by the Philistines before it reverted to its rightful owners. People thought that the Ark by itself wins wars. The Ark by itself does not win the war, Rothman said. The Ark by itself represents the connection between the people of Israel and God, and this is what wins the wars. Ohad Tal, another Knesset member, discussed the symbolism of the replica Ark's delivery in wartime. How can we know if we are actually winning this war or not, he said. The first stage is first of all to understand what we are fighting about. When Hamas terrorists penetrated Israeli villages and kibbutzim on October 7th, 2023, and murdered and raped civilians, they shouted in Arabic that their God is great, as if they are fighting for God. The terrorists called the war which they launched the Al-Aqsa Jerusalem flood. So when the Lord said in the scriptures, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him, you have well, I'll go into this at the end of this, okay? I won't interrupt the article, but they didn't do that in order to expand their backyard or to improve their education system. No, they did that for Jerusalem, for the Temple Mount. They wanted to prevent the unity that this ark represents. The Jewish people are fighting not just against Hamas, not just to bring back security to Gaza or the northern border in Lebanon, or against Iran, he said, and we are fighting to bring back to the world the unity that the ark, the temple, and Jerusalem represent. Jake told attendees that the replica ark might be providing some symbolic military assistance already. We brought it to Israel to get it reattached to all of the places it was before. We actually visited Shiloh, which we say Shiloh, he said. Jake hopes that the replica ark can be used more formally in the current war. We would like to bring it to a number of military camps, he told attendees, and the original idea was to actually bring it physically into Gaza, but we are running into some administrative challenges. Topper, a businessman and philanthropist who lives in New York and Florida and who funded the project, told attendees that the replica ark is a passionate task that was performed that encountered construction, engineering, architectural difficulties every step of the way. When you're doing something good and you're finding that you're making progress in an unexpected way, you almost know that you are operating in line with the goodness and the essence of the Creator, he said. That's what this project is, and I'm thrilled to be able to be a facilitator. It was a project designed to bring peace to the world and to bring victory to the land of Israel and to bring peace and kindness to America again. The project was so dearly received by God that he personally greased the wheels of every obstacle that we came across. The rewards of 3.5-year journey were amplified for Topper when the replica ark arrived in Jerusalem. When we finally got the Torah delivered to us, it was this morning, and it was at the city of David, he said. When that Torah was put in, this ark became weaponized. Topper anticipates that the project will yield major benefits. There's going to be a force that it is absolutely so powerful that it's going to be something that we've seen in the modern movies, but for good. Lieutenant Colonel Mordecai Kedar, a research fellow at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University, told attendees that the Ark is a concept in other faith traditions, including Islam. The Ark is mentioned in the Quran in the 2nd chapter, the scholar, who's one of Israel's leading cultural experts, told attendees. He added that some researchers have made what he considers a false comparison between the Kaaba, the holy stone in Mecca, and the Ark. The symbolism of an Ark replica, approximately the return of the Ark to Judaism, is significant according to Kedar. Now we can see with our own eyes something which we have missed for 2,000 years. Well, they've missed the true living Ark for 2,000 years, I can tell you that much. We have never seen such things. We've heard about them, we learned about them, we see pictures, but we've never seen them in real life. It's very important for us to see how these really were, to touch things, to see them, to measure them, to stand near them. We haven't done so for 2,000 years. That's because the living Ark of the testimony of God is the Ark of the Covenant. We can see, we can feel, we can touch, and we can take pictures with them. The covenant remains valid. It wasn't clear if the replica ark would remain in Jerusalem long term or return to the United States, where it was mainly constructed to tour and inspire individuals. The replica has already visited Mar-a-Lago, the Palm Beach, Florida home of President Donald Trump. Completion of the project and the replica's delivery to Jerusalem has special significance to Jake. What the ark represents is the fact that the covenant is still valid. It was never abrogated, and the covenant is still strong, he told attendees. God's commitment to his people is as strong as it was 3,500 years ago when the ark was built. It should be the weapon that walks in front of the army, he said. We truly believe that it should be both a weapon and inspirational too. The project, he said, was among the most difficult and demanding upon which he has ever worked. It's drained a lot of my psyche working on it, and it's put tremendous stress on everybody, he said. The end result, I think, it speaks for itself. Okay, so let's go back to the prophet Jeremiah and what he said in Jeremiah 3:16. And when you have multiplied and been fruitful in the land, in those days, declares the Lord, they shall no more say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind, or be remembered, or missed. It shall not be made again. So in other words, the one that was made in the wilderness was for a certain purpose, and it was a replica. It was a model. It was not the living ark. When Moses went up on Mount Sinai, the Lord appeared to him there. He saw the Lord. The Lord showed him things to replicate of God's testimony, one of which is his throne, the Ark of the Covenant, which is his testimony. And so he was told to have Bezalel make a replica of what he had seen. So the earthly version is just an acacia box overlaid with gold with the two cherubim on either end. I believe they're on either end of the lid. I don't believe they're sitting on top because their wings make a covering where the throne chair of God is, that God sits on the throne. So the living version came 2,000 years ago in Messiah, King Yeshua, and he was here. And I have some fantastic stories in my book about these details. And my book is at olivepresspublisher.com. It's called The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, The Messiah King of Israel by Kimberly K. Ballard. That's me. And the Lord showed me things that are just so astonishing about all of this. And it's kind of like the whole basis of my entire book. And so truly, I wrote a lot of things about the Ark of the Covenant. I even touched on Ron's supposed finding and all of the stuff about, that the Messiah's blood is on the mercy seat. But there's more to the story than what Ron told you. The Lord gave me another part of the story that is completely different and astonishing. And so the living ark was taken up into heaven. And so for 2,000 years, there's not been an ark because he's been in heaven and we've been following after him. And so the replica that they made, the fact that they made just a model at first out of plywood and then made one out of the purest gold and acacia out of Egypt tells me they intend to do something more with it. I mean, why would you make it out of the purest gold unless you intend to use it in the third temple and use it for battle and all of these things? So truly what they had in the wilderness was the royal standard of God. But God departed from off the Ark of the Covenant. And whether they bring out the real one that Moses replicated from under the Temple Mount, where Ron said it was, whether they ever do that or not, or they use this replica made out of the purest gold and tons of acacia wood from Egypt, then I think that they intend to use it, but to try to bring people underneath the yoke of the Sanhedrin, that is the Antichrist spirit, because essentially what they're doing when they're remaking this is they are rejecting the living version that Moses replicated it from. And God is that living version. His Messiah's testimony is that version. And so we're following after the living version. We will cross over the Jordan River into the eternal promised land after him. And they are following after a replica made like the one that Moses replicated that was just a copy. So it's really important to note that the one that's up in heaven is the living version. Everything in it's the living version, and everything with this one is not the living version. It's just merely a copy. So truly, it doesn't have any real power, and it's interesting that they will think that it does have power. They might be able to show signs and wonders with it. Remember, I told you that Rabbi Richmond had said that when they build the temple, that they will be able to call down fire from heaven. And that's in the prophecy of something that the Antichrist does. He fools people by calling down fire from heaven. So they're using trickery and things like that to make you believe that you should follow after this ark, or, you know, that it's going to save you somehow. But the only one that can save us is the one we're following after, whose throne chair it is, King Jesus, Yeshua HaMashiach of Nazareth, the true heir that's coming to reign at the end of the 7-year time of Jacob's trouble. And he will reign from Jerusalem, and the living version will be among us. And he is our royal standard that goes into battle before us. So this is why this thing has no power without him being included in it. If they're building this replica and they're rejecting their king of all power that sits on this throne, do you think that this replica has any power whatsoever to save anybody? It doesn't. And the true living one that's in heaven that we read about in the Bible in Revelation, that's already up there in heaven, he's coming again. And he will rule and reign from his throne. So don't be fooled by deceptions in the last days about the Ark of the Covenant. Be very careful about this. And at some point, I am really hoping that I can get my book on film so that I can show more of the testimony about this. I'll see you in the next video. Please like, subscribe, and share my video, and support my video if you want. I'll see you the next time.